There comes a moment in every life when the world as you've known it begins to shift, subtly at first, then undeniably. The things that once made sense begin to unravel. The people, routines, and beliefs you've clung to no longer feel like home. And though nothing may appear to change on the outside, deep within, something ancient is waking up. This is not chaos. This is the quiet signal that your life is preparing to transform. The first sign that your life is about to change comes in the form of recurring symbols, often appearing in your dreams, your day-to-day encounters, or even your spontaneous thoughts. These symbols may seem mundane at first, but their power lies not in logic, but in repetition and emotional resonance. They arrive uninvited, yet persistent. When a door, for example, may show up night after night in your dreams. At first, it's just a door. Then you begin to notice it when you're awake, perhaps on a walk, in a movie scene, or a book cover. It seems to follow you. And then something inside you begins to feel that this door is more than just an object. It is a message. Symbols are the language of the unconscious mind. Where words fail, symbols speak. They bypass rationality and communicate directly with the soul. When such imagery begins to repeat itself, it suggests that the unconscious is stirring. It is reaching upward, trying to guide you towards something you have not yet fully grasped. Perhaps a transformation is underway, one that has not yet reached the surface of your conscious mind, but is very much alive underneath. The recurring symbol becomes a mirror, reflecting a part of you that is on the cusp of awakening. Take, for instance, water. It may appear first as a calm lake, then later as a turbulent ocean, and finally as a rising tide in a place where no water should be. These aren't random dream elements. They are symbolic manifestations of emotional undercurrents, often indicating emotional renewal, cleansing, or overwhelming change. The water changes form as your psyche prepares for what lies ahead. What begins as subtle imagery becomes an emotional signal. The significance of these recurring symbols lies in their power to anchor the unconscious within the conscious realm. They are signposts. They do not show the full map, but they point in a direction. Often, they surface at times of psychological tension, dissatisfaction, or emotional disconnection. Something within you is no longer content with the current state. The recurring symbol then functions as a call to attention, beckoning you to look inward, to begin a process of reflection. These symbols may also appear in real-life patterns. You may encounter the same animal multiple times in unlikely ways, or hear a particular phrase spoken by different people within a short time. These are externalizations of internal energies, projected outward in symbolic form. The psyche is not limited to dreams. It interacts with the outer world through meaningful coincidences. This interplay between inner imagery and outer experience creates a sense of being drawn into something, into a mystery that demands to be explored. Ignoring these recurring symbols often leads to inner tension or stagnation. The more you deny their importance, the louder they become. They persist because they are not optional. They are essential cues in the process of transformation. Engaging with them, on the other hand, initiates an inner dialogue. You begin to ask questions. What does this mean for me? Why now? These questions pull you deeper into your own psyche, inviting interpretation, contemplation, and eventual understanding. You become both the seeker and the guide. Well, ultimately, recurring symbols are not answers. They are thresholds. They signal that the unconscious is inviting you to cross over into new territory, to shed the skin of the familiar and step into the unknown. When these symbols become persistent, rich in emotion, and impossible to ignore, It is not merely coincidence, it is preparation. Something within you has already begun to change, and the symbols are showing you the way. When your life is about to change, one of the most powerful and unsettling signs you will encounter is the sudden and unavoidable confrontation with your shadow. The shadow represents the hidden, suppressed, and often denied aspects of your personality. These may be traits you deem undesirable, emotions you've been taught to fear or shame, or memories you've tried to forget. But when transformation approaches, these buried contents no longer remain silent. They rise, uninvited, into your awareness. You may begin to notice reactions within yourself that feel unfamiliar or even disturbing. You might find yourself growing irritated more easily or envious of others in ways that surprise you. You may feel bursts of rage, sorrow, or fear that seem to come from nowhere. These emotional disturbances are not random. They are echoes from the depths of your psyche, where all that has been exiled waits for the moment to re-emerge, and they do not surface to torment you. They arise because they seek integration. Real change cannot happen without reclaiming the parts of yourself you've disowned. This confrontation can also take the form of projections. You may begin to see parts of your shadow in other people, criticizing them, hating them, or obsessing over them, without realizing that these reactions are mirrors of your own unconscious material. The people who trigger you the most are often those who reflect something unresolved within you. This process is not pleasant, it is rarely graceful, but it is essential. Without confronting the shadow, no authentic transformation is possible. You cannot become whole while continuing to deny a portion of your own truth. During this time, old defense mechanisms begin to break down. The rational mind, which has served for so long to contain the shadow, starts to falter. You may experience confusion, disorientation, or even a crisis of identity. You might ask yourself questions like, "Who am I really?" Or, "Why do I feel like I'm falling apart?" This sense of fragmentation is a natural consequence of the dismantling of the false self, the persona you've worn to fit into the world. As this outer shell cracks, the contents of the shadow pour out. There is often shame in this process. You may judge yourself harshly for feeling things you think you shouldn't feel, or remembering things you've long tried to bury. But this judgment is part of the old system, the system that kept the shadow in chains. To move forward, you must relinquish the illusion that you are only what is light, only what is good, only what is acceptable. You must face what lies beneath, not with fear, but with radical honesty and compassion. This is not indulgence in darkness. It is the reclamation of your full self. The confrontation with the shadow often brings up unresolved wounds from childhood or earlier life experiences. The past becomes vivid again, not as a repetition, but as an invitation. You are being asked to revisit what was once too painful to hold, to see it with the eyes of who you are now, and to finally make peace with it. In doing so, you reclaim not only your pain, but also the energy and wisdom that have been locked away with it. You begin to realize that the shadow is not your enemy. It is your hidden teacher. It contains the very aspects of you that are required for your next chapter. Your assertiveness, your passion, your creativity, your truth. These were buried not because they were unworthy, but because the world, or your past self, wasn't ready to hold them. Now that your life is about to change, you are ready, and the shadow knows this. That is why it comes forward now, demanding to be seen, heard, and finally integrated. When your life is on the verge of transformation, one of the clearest and often most painful signs is the disintegration of old patterns. These are the structures, habits, roles, and identities you have constructed over time to survive, to fit in, to maintain order in a world that often feels uncertain. They are the frameworks that have given your life shape, but not necessarily meaning, and when deep change is near, these frameworks begin to erode. The erosion may be slow at first, subtle dissatisfaction, quiet restlessness, or an unshakable sense that what once worked no longer does. But eventually the shift becomes undeniable. What once gave you comfort begins to feel restrictive. What once defined you starts to feel false. You may wake up one day and realize that the job you've pursued for years no longer fulfills you. Or you may look around at your social circle and feel oddly out of place, as though you've outgrown a skin that refuses to stretch. In relationships, you may begin to see through old dynamics that kept you small or silent, and wonder how you ever accepted them in the first place. Beliefs that were once firm about the world, about yourself, about what matters, suddenly lose their grip. This unraveling of certainty is not a sign that something is going wrong. It is a sign that something new is struggling to be born. These old patterns often carry with them a sense of identity. You may have told yourself, "I am this kind of person," or "this is what I do," or "this is what people expect of me." And when those narratives fall apart, so too does your sense of self. This is one of the most difficult parts of the transformation process. The in-between space, where the old has crumbled and the new has not yet formed. You are left without a clear map, floating in unfamiliar territory. It can feel terrifying, but it is also necessary. The loss of these patterns is not a punishment. It is a clearing, a sacred demolition of all that stands in the way of authenticity. You may try to hold on. That is human. You may attempt to rebuild the old, to patch the crumbling walls of your former life, hoping that if you just work harder, if you just keep pushing, things will return to normal. But they don't. They can't. Because the old structure was built to support an older version of you, and that version is dissolving. Something deeper has been awakened, something truer, and it refuses to be confined by outdated forms. Sometimes this disintegration manifests externally: a job loss, a breakup, a relocation, a sudden health scare. These external shifts often echo internal ones, forcing you to confront what you have been avoiding. Other times the change is subtler, purely internal, a slow realization, a quiet rebellion inside your heart that you can no longer ignore. In both cases, the theme is the same: what was familiar is no longer sustainable. This collapse is painful not only because it strips you of comfort, but because it demands trust. You are being asked to surrender control, to let go of the known without having a guarantee of what comes next. This is not an easy ask. It requires courage to sit in the ashes of your former life and wait, not with resignation, but with faith that something more aligned is on its way. It is in this space where the old has fallen away and the new has not yet arrived that the deepest transformation takes root. You are not breaking down, you are breaking open. The patterns must fall so that your true path can finally emerge. When a major life transformation is approaching, one of the clearest and most mysterious indicators is the sudden and frequent occurrence of synchronicities. These are moments where internal states and external events appear to align in ways that defy logical explanation. You might think of someone you haven't spoken to in years, and they unexpectedly call you that same day. Or you're wrestling with a deep personal question, and you open a book to a random page that offers the exact insight you needed. These events are not coincidences in the traditional sense. They carry meaning that feels personal, intimate, and precisely timed. They suggest that your inner world and the outer world are no longer functioning independently, but are beginning to reflect each other in ways that feel guided, almost orchestrated. At first, these experiences may feel like a fluke, easily dismissed as random chance. But when they begin to happen repeatedly, in quick succession, and with increasing emotional resonance, you start to feel the invisible threads pulling at the edge of your awareness. It is as though life itself is leaning in, trying to get your attention. The ordinary becomes infused with symbolism, a line in a song, a sentence in a conversation overheard at a coffee shop, a phrase on a billboard. These seemingly mundane details begin to speak directly to you. They carry messages that stir something within, bypassing logic and reaching a deeper level of understanding that you can't quite explain, but cannot ignore. This increase in synchronicity usually arises when your unconscious mind is becoming more active and integrated. It is a sign that your inner world is stirring beneath the surface, beginning to shift in preparation for something new. The psyche is not isolated. It interacts with the world through symbols, energy, and resonance. As you draw closer to a significant internal shift, the boundaries between what is within and what is without begin to thin. The world becomes a mirror, and life starts responding to the deeper frequencies you are emitting, frequencies you may not yet be fully aware of. This is why the synchronicities seem to know what you are going through. They are not magical in a fantasy sense, but deeply meaningful reflections of a psychological and spiritual realignment already underway. These moments often bring with them a strange sense of reassurance. Even if your outer life feels chaotic or uncertain, synchronicities offer a quiet, powerful sense that something larger is at play. They provide a pattern in the randomness, a signal in the noise. You may not understand where you are going, but the path starts lighting up, one symbol at a time. This creates a feeling of connectedness, of being accompanied by something unseen but deeply aware of you. You begin to trust the process more, even if you still feel fear or doubt, because the signs keep appearing, gently affirming that you are not lost. There's also an emotional quality to these moments that cannot be denied. They often carry a weight that logic alone cannot explain. You might be moved to tears by the simplicity of a moment that feels like it was meant just for you. These events don't instruct you with facts. They awaken you through meaning. They stir something ancestral, intuitive, and timeless within you. You may feel a sense of destiny, or at the very least, a sense that you are part of a larger. Synchronicities are a reminder that change is not just an internal process, but a cosmic one. When they begin to intensify, it is not just your life that is moving, it is the deeper currents of the psyche, aligning with the rhythms of the universe. The outer world begins to echo the silent whispers of your soul, and through that resonance, you are being guided toward the next phase of your becoming. When your life is about to change in a profound way, an unmistakable sign is the emergence of an internal tension between who you have been and who you are becoming. This inner conflict is not always loud or dramatic. At times, it is a subtle but persistent discomfort that grows quietly in the background of your daily existence. It is the sensation that something within you no longer fits, that a part of your identity feels worn out or misaligned. This discomfort might first appear as boredom with routines that once felt satisfying, or as an inexplicable resistance to continuing down a path you've walked for years. Over time, this restlessness transforms into something deeper, a friction between your current self and an unformed, unseen version of you that is beginning to stir beneath the surface. This tension is not created by external pressures alone. Rather, it originates from within, from a deeper part of your psyche that has outgrown the constraints of your former identity, the persona you constructed to survive, to achieve, to be accepted. It begins to crack. You may feel as though you're standing on the edge of two worlds, the familiar, where everything is known and safe, and the unfamiliar, where a more authentic version of you waits to emerge. But this emergence does not come peacefully. It creates a psychological rift, a battle between your attachment to the known and your longing for what lies beyond it. During this stage, your internal dialogue begins to shift. Questions you never asked yourself before start rising to the surface. You might begin to wonder, what do I actually want? Who am I when no one is watching? Is this the life I truly chose, or the one I was conditioned to accept? These questions are not easily answered, and they often lead to more uncertainty than clarity at first. Yet, they're not meant to give you immediate solutions. Their purpose is to break open the shell of unconscious living. They are a summons to self-inquiry, a call to step out of the passive current of your past and into the active shaping of your future. This internal dissonance can also manifest as emotional conflict. You may feel anxious for no clear reason, or experience moments of deep sadness that don't seem to be tied to any particular event. You may even find yourself grieving aspects of your life that are still technically intact, relationships, roles, or routines, because on some level, you already know they no longer represent the truth of who you are. The grief comes not just from what you may lose, but from what you realize you've never fully allowed yourself to claim. And within that grief is hidden a seed of awakening. There is also a kind of guilt that can accompany this inner split. You might question whether you are being ungrateful for wanting more, or feel selfish for considering a new path that could disrupt the lives of others. But these feelings are part of the transitional threshold. They reveal just how deeply your old self was woven into external expectations. The very presence of this guilt shows that a deeper authenticity is emerging, one that no longer wishes to perform for approval, but to exist in alignment with your soul's truth. The tension between the old and the new self is not a flaw or a failure. It is a necessary pressure that propels the transformation forward. Without it, there would be no reason to change, no urgency to evolve. It is this inner struggle that generates the energy required for rebirth. The discomfort is not a sign that something is wrong. It is the labor pain of becoming. And in its midst, if you stay present, if you listen deeply, you will begin to feel the faint but certain pulse of your emerging self calling you home. When your life is on the verge of significant transformation, you will begin to feel an almost magnetic pull towards solitude and introspection. This isn't the type of loneliness that comes from isolation or social disconnection. Rather, it is a deliberate withdrawal, a turning inward that feels both necessary and inevitable. The noise of the outer world begins to lose its grip on you. Conversations that once excited you now feel superficial. Distractions no longer satisfy, and the pursuit of validation from others begins to feel hollow. You start to crave silence, not because it is peaceful, but because in the silence you can finally hear yourself. There is something ancient within you that begins to awaken, something that has been drowned out by years of external noise, and now it demands your attention. This inward movement often arises unexpectedly. One day you may wake up with a strong urge to spend time alone, to reflect, to walk in nature without speaking, to write down your thoughts without needing them to make sense. You may not fully understand why this solitude calls to you so strongly, but you can't ignore it. It feels as if your soul is preparing for something, as if an unseen force is asking you to create space for reflection, for clarity, for healing. It's not always comfortable. In fact, in the early stages, this solitude can feel unsettling. When the distractions are gone and you are left alone with yourself, all that has been buried begins to surface. Old emotions, unresolved memories, forgotten dreams. They rise into awareness, not to harm you, but to be witnessed, felt, and understood. This is the sacred pause before the transformation. The silence is not empty, it is full of meaning. It is within this space that you begin to recognize patterns you've been living unconsciously, choices you've made out of fear, and truths you've ignored to stay safe. These realizations don't come through effort or analysis. They arrive in the stillness, like whispers from a deeper part of you. And once heard, they cannot be unheard. There is a kind of clarity that emerges only in solitude, a knowing that bypasses logic and goes straight to the core of your being. You begin to see your life not just as a series of events, but as a symbolic unfolding of your inner evolution. In this space, your intuition becomes sharper. You begin to sense what feels right and what doesn't, not based on external outcomes, but on internal resonance. You start to trust your inner compass more than the opinions of others. The desire to please fades, replaced by a desire to be real. And being real often requires being alone long enough to remember who you were before the world told you who to be. The solitude becomes a sacred container, a cocoon in which the old self quietly dissolves so that the new self can take shape. This turning inward may distance you from people who once felt close. You may find that you no longer relate to them in the same way, but this is not rejection, it is realignment. As your inner world transforms, your outer world must shift to reflect that change. The solitude is not about cutting people off. It is about returning to yourself so you can relate to others from a place of wholeness rather than fragmentation. It is a preparation for re-entering life with greater depth, clarity, and authenticity. This is the paradox of transformation. To move forward, you must first return inward. In the quiet, you begin to reconnect with the parts of you that have long been ignored. You begin to shed the layers that no longer serve you, and in doing so, you make room, not just for change, but for the emergence of a self that has been waiting patiently, silently beneath the noise for the moment when you would finally be still enough to hear it. What you see when your life is about to change is not always obvious. It's not grand or loud, but quiet and persistent, like the cracking of old walls, the stirring of forgotten dreams, the return of your own voice. You will feel the friction between your past and your becoming. You will be called to walk away from the noise and into your own depths. And in the stillness you will find signs, not from the world, but from within, that your old self is dissolving to make space for something more honest, more whole. Transformation does not arrive with certainty, it arrives with surrender. And when you begin to trust what you feel more than what you know, you will realize your life isn't falling apart. It's finally beginning to align with the truth of who you are.